Forget the pyramids. The real shock is the granite. Because when scientists and researchers pushed Grok AI to answer one of Egypt's oldest engineering questions, the machine did not expose a fantasy. It exposed a modern weakness. We have become so separated from ancient craftsmanship that disciplined human labor now sounds less believable than lost machines. That is the wound at the center of this story. How did the Egyptians cut granite, one of the hardest stones they ever worked, without steel saws, electric motors, or industrial blades? And why do the marks left behind at places like Aswan still feel so unervingly precise that people keep reaching for explanations bigger than history itself? The viral version of this mystery usually begins with a visual shock. You see the unfinished obelisk in Aswan lying in the quarry like a ship trapped in stone, still attached to the bedrock after more than 3,000 years. You hear that, if completed, it would have stood around 42 meters high and weighed about 1,168 tons, as the official Egyptian monuments record explains. Then the camera lingers on quarry channels, smooth plains, red granite, and the question lands at once. How could anyone shape something this massive from material this unforgiving using what sound like primitive tools? That is the moment when modern intuition starts to panic. We are comfortable with cranes, diamond saws, and computer modeling. We are not comfortable imagining ancient hands doing work that still feels physically humiliating to our own age. Granite is what makes the whole subject burn. Limestone is easy for popular imagination. Granite is not. It sits around 7 on the Mohs scale, hard enough to resist casual explanation and hard enough to make the standard story sound absurd to anyone hearing it for the first time. The objection comes instantly. Copper is softer than granite, so copper tools could not possibly have cut it. That statement sounds smart because it is partially true and completely incomplete. Archaeologists never argued that Egyptian workers simply pushed bare copper against granite and watched it surrender. Alfred Lucas and J.R. Harrell, in Ancient Egyptian Materials and Industries, laid out a more serious picture long ago. Hard stone working involved combinations of tools, abrasives, time, and force. The copper could hold form and direction. The abrasive could do the grinding. The method was not magical. It was technical. That distinction matters, because once you miss it, the entire conversation falls into theater. Dennis A. Stocks spent years dragging the question back into the realm of physical testing. In experiments in Egyptian archaeology and in his research on granite working at Aswan, he reconstructed ancient style tools and put them to work. His findings did not create a romantic miracle. They created a portrait of exhausting competence. Dolerite pounders could batter channels and depressions into hard granite. Copper saws and tubular drills, when paired with abrasive slurry, could grind into stone slowly and with terrible patience. Nothing about the process was elegant in the modern sense. It was loud, repetitive, abrasive, and punishing on the body. But punishing does not mean impossible. In many ways that is the most difficult sentence in this entire subject, because people do not like explanations that demand reverence for endurance instead of wonder at hidden devices. This is why the question becomes so volatile when an AI enters the scene. People do not ask Grok AI about Egyptian granite because the books are missing. They ask because they want a voice that sounds new, clean, and final. They want something to cut through the dust of old scholarship and deliver a verdict that feels like revelation. But a language model does not walk into the quarry. It does not lift a dolerite hammerstone, inspect a granite core, or date a fissure. It synthesizes what humans have already argued, tested, and written. If the prompt leans toward mystery, the answer can sound mysterious. If the prompt leans toward evidence, the answer bends back toward pounding stones, abrasives, copper tools, and astonishingly organized labor. The machine is not a prophet. It is a mirror with a voice. What shocks people is often not what it knows, but what it reflects about the stories they most want to hear. Still, the skeptical side of the granite debate should not be dismissed as foolish. It draws strength from things the eye can genuinely see. Certain surfaces in Egyptian hard stone look almost offensively regular to a modern viewer. Some joints appear so close and so controlled that our instincts leap straight toward machinery. Since the days of Flinders Petrie, drill cores and cut marks have fueled arguments about pressure, feed rate, and method. Later writers outside mainstream archaeology turned those arguments into a thriving mythology of lost technology. Once someone has heard enough of those comparisons, patience begins to sound weak and mystery begins to sound strong. The mind rebels. Surely, it says, no civilization without industrial tools could have done this. Yet archaeology asks us to do something far harder than rebellion. It asks us to restore process. A polished surface cannot explain itself. A drill core cannot explain itself. A quarry channel cannot explain itself. Each belongs to a sequence of actions, and those actions were not all the same. Quarry extraction is not final finishing. Rough dressing is not polishing. Drilling is not sawing. Sawing is not transport. Transport is not fitting. Public fascination often collapses all those stages into one emotional photograph, then demands a single revolutionary answer. But Egyptian granite working was a chain of operations. Hard dolerite pounders could rough out surfaces and isolate masses. Abrasive drilling could open holes. Saws with abrasive could grind along lines. Smoothing and polishing could transform appearance dramatically afterward. Once the chain is restored, the stone stops looking like a magic trick and starts looking like a system. Difficult, yes. Impossible, no. That word system is where serious historians and archaeologists keep trying to push the discussion. Dieter Arnold, in Building in Egypt, Pharaonic Stone Masonry, wrote about quarrying, planning, measuring, transporting, and repair because he understood that monuments cannot be explained honestly if they are treated as isolated miracles. Mark Lehner has done the same for Giza. In the complete pyramids and in later research, he places the monuments back inside the labor settlements, harbors, ramps, crews, and administrative structures that made them possible. This changes everything. The wrong mental picture is one man with one tool facing one impossible block. The right picture is a state turning season after season of coordinated work into stone. That is harder for modern people to imagine because we are used to personal effort, not civilizational effort. But Egypt did not confront granite as an individual problem. It confronted granite as an organized kingdom. And once you return the kingdom to the frame, the emotional logic of the monuments changes. A quarry is no longer just a place where stone was cut. It becomes the first stage in a national act of concentration. Quarry crews break and shape the mass. Transport teams move it. Scribes record it. Overseers schedule it. Specialists finish it. Priests and kings give it meaning. Food systems, river movement, labor rotation, and technical tradition all become part of the same mechanism. This is why Pierre Tallet's discovery of the Red Sea papyri mattered so much. Together with Mark Lehner's work, those documents revealed the world of Khufu in administrative motion. The diary of Inspector Mirror did not speak in the language of mystery. It spoke in the language of transport, labor, and oversight. To a modern audience, that can sound disappointingly ordinary. In truth, bureaucracy is one of the ancient world's greatest technologies. Granite yields not only to force, but to continuity. This is also why the unfinished obelisk at Aswan is such a devastating object. It captures mastery in the exact moment mastery meets limit. The official explanation says work was abandoned because flaws and fissures appeared in the granite. For some viewers that sounds too mundane, too unsatisfying, almost like an excuse. But real engineering is full of unsatisfying endings. Stone cracks. Projects fail. Material pushes back. If the Egyptians possessed effortless hidden devices far beyond anything acknowledged in the archaeological record, why is that giant still lying in the quarry floor? Why stop? Why leave such an immense project unfinished forever? The crack is not a weakness in the historical account. It is one of its strongest signatures of reality. Real craftsmen can be extraordinary and still lose arguments with stone. The lost technology theory also carries a burden its defenders rarely face squarely. Technologies do not exist alone. They create ecosystems. If pharaonic Egypt had access to true industrial-style cutting devices, we would expect more than a few surfaces that look surprising to modern eyes. We would expect supply chains, maintenance traditions, specialized debris, transitional forms, depictions, terminology, and traces of broader technological consequences. Instead, what the archaeological record overwhelmingly preserves is a world of dolerite pounders near quarry zones, copper tools, abrasives, transport infrastructure, harbor systems, worker settlements, inscriptions, and administrative traces. James A. Harrell and Per Storemyr, in their work on ancient Egyptian quarries, help anchor that reality in geography. The Aswan region was a broad quarry landscape tied to specific materials, including granite, granodiorite, and dolerite. Context matters because context is the enemy of convenient wonder. Even the places where mainstream interpretation becomes more technical, not less, still point back toward human capability rather than fantasy. Research revisited through the Penn Museum questioned older assumptions about loose quartz sand and copper drills reproducing every feature once expected on granite cores. But that is not archaeology collapsing. That is archaeology behaving honestly. Claims are tested, corrected, narrowed, and strengthened. Dennis Stocks never argued that every single mark in Egypt had been explained with perfect finality. He argued that experimental archaeology demonstrated a much greater capacity in ancient methods than casual skeptics assume. That is a serious and measured conclusion. It leaves room for debate without handing the quarry over to speculation. Real scholarship does not promise that wonder will disappear. It promises that wonder will be disciplined by evidence. So what did Grok AI really reveal when asked how Egyptians cut granite? It revealed our appetite for astonishment without patience. We want a sentence that can overpower centuries of debate. We want the machine to sound like an oracle because an oracle lets us skip the slow work of weighing sources. But when the sources are real, they refuse to vanish. Alfred Lucas and J.R. Harris remain there. Dennis A. Stocks remains there. Dieter Arnold remains there. Mark Lehner remains there. Pierre Tallet remains there. Harrell and Storemyr remain there. The quarry remains there too, with its dolerite stones, its unfinished monument, its raw surfaces and abandoned intentions. AI can summarize the argument, but it cannot replace the argument. If anything, it makes the old human question more severe. Why are we so ready to believe in a vanished machine and so reluctant to believe in a vanished standard of disciplined labor? Perhaps the answer is emotional before it is intellectual. Modern people trust speed. Ancient Egypt trusted duration. We trust power that is loud, visible, and mechanical. Egypt often expressed power through repetition, organization, and the ability to sustain effort long after other societies would have stopped. That difference distorts our instincts. We look at a polished granite block and imagine a blade. We do not imagine apprentices learning pressure through their wrists, quarrymen reading weakness in stone by sound, foremen checking lines under brutal sun, or scribes making sure the next load reaches the river on time. Yet history is built from exactly that kind of intelligence. Not digital intelligence. Not industrial acceleration. Material intelligence. Bodily intelligence. Institutional intelligence. A whole civilization can become a tool if it is organized long enough. There is another reason the question remains so emotionally explosive. Granite survives in a way softer stone often does not. It carries marks longer. It keeps scars. It resists erosion strongly enough to preserve arguments across millennia. That durability means modern eyes encounter ancient work with far more intimacy than they do with vanished timber structures, mud brick installations, or perishable devices that once made up the rest of Egyptian daily life. Granite tricks us because it looks closer to us than it really is. Its surfaces can feel almost modern under sunlight. Its hard edges seem less like relics than decisions frozen in place. That illusion of closeness invites a dangerous assumption that we fully understand what competent work should look like. Often we do not. It also helps explain why so many people mistake unfamiliarity for impossibility. If you have never watched a skilled mason, lapidary worker, or quarry specialist do difficult work slowly, then slowness itself begins to look fraudulent. We live in a culture trained by instant replication and mechanical speed. We expect a demonstration to be short, impressive, and easy to replay. Ancient workmanship often demands the opposite kind of imagination. It asks us to picture acts repeated so many times, with such controlled monotony, that the final surface stops feeling human to observers who have never lived inside such repetition. The problem is not that the Egyptians left impossible traces. The problem is that we have lost emotional familiarity with the scale of trained endurance. That loss becomes even clearer when you consider how much of ancient skill lived in bodies rather than in words. No surviving manual can fully record the pressure of a drill held at the right angle, the rhythm needed to keep an abrasive working efficiently, or the sound a stone makes when it is beginning to fail internally. Apprenticeship passes through gesture, not only through text. Entire traditions of competence can vanish from the world and leave behind only their finished results, which later ages then mistake for miracles because the intermediate knowledge is gone. In that sense, the mystery is real. But it is not the mystery of science fiction. It is the mystery of vanished human practice. So yes, the answer can still shock people. But not for the reason the thumbnails promise. The Egyptians cut granite with hard stone pounders, copper tools used with abrasives, careful measurement, extraordinary patience, and the administrative force of a state that could coordinate labor on a scale modern individuals almost instinctively reject. The answer sounds plain only until you let its consequences settle. Then it becomes enormous. It means the ancient world was not waiting helplessly for modern technology to rescue it. It means real human beings, bound together by hierarchy, belief, and knowledge, could solve physical problems that still unsettle our imagination. It means the past was neither childish nor magical. It was formidable. And maybe that is why the granite of Egypt still feels haunted. Not because it hides a machine under the sand, but because it preserves the presence of people who were more capable than we casually allow. The unfinished obelisk still lies in Aswan with its crack running through ambition like a final truth. The quarry channels still mark the bedrock. The argument is still alive because the stone still resists our vanity. Grok AI did not expose a secret civilization. It exposed how badly we want history to flatter us by being either simpler or stranger than it was. The harder answer remains standing in the desert light. Ancient Egyptians shaped granite through technique, abrasives, organization, and endurance so severe that later ages keep mistaking it for impossibility. And when you finally accept that, the feeling left behind is not disappointment. It is a quieter and deeper awe, touched by humility, because the past turns out to be fully human, and that may be the most shocking thing of all. There is another reason the granite question keeps returning no matter how often people try to settle it. Hard stone preserves not only marks, but attitude. You can feel, almost physically, the confidence of the workers who approached it. They were not experimenting in panic. They were operating inside a tradition. Somewhere behind every surviving surface was a chain of apprenticeship. Older hands correcting younger ones, experienced foremen judging lines by eye, quarrymen learning how a change in sound could warn of weakness before the fracture became visible. None of that knowledge survives in a complete manual. It lived in wrists, shoulders, ears, and routines. That absence tempts modern audiences to replace missing craft memory with imagined machinery. But the disappearance of living technique is not evidence that technique never existed. It is simply one of history's cruelest habits. Bodies vanish first. Stone stays longest. And when the bodies are gone, the stone can start to look inhuman. That is why AI, for all its power, can only stand at the edge of this mystery. It can organize claims. It can compare arguments. It can summarize Lucas and Harris, Dennis Stocks, Dieter Arnold, Mark Lehner, Pierre Tallet, James Harrell, and Per Storemyr in seconds. What it cannot do is inherit touch. It cannot feel the resistance of granite through a tool handle. It cannot know the pace at which a human crew learns rhythm together. It cannot recover the atmosphere of a quarry where labor, authority, weather, religion, and exhaustion fused into one relentless routine. In that sense, the answer will always remain partly larger than any machine that describes it. Not because the truth is supernatural, but because human skill is never fully reducible to words. The Egyptians did not merely possess tools. They possessed a culture able to turn effort into precision and repetition into permanence. And that cultural force may be the most difficult technology of all for the modern world to recognize. What shocked everyone was not magic, but the return of an older possibility. That human beings, under pressure, can become more precise, more patient, and more relentless than we remember.